Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to today's Knowledge is Great lecture, enhancing cybersecurity via AI and big data. My name is Leighton Ernsberger, and I'm the Director of Education and English at the British Council East Asia, based here in Singapore. The Knowledge is Great lecture series was launched in 2015 by the British Council in Singapore. It showcases the UK's knowledge, creativity, and innovation by inviting leading UK specialists to speak on areas of topical debate and discussion. If you have joined us on these lectures before, you will know that we have been running these lectures once a month since the beginning of the year, typically on the last Thursday of each month. So do look out for our invitation to future lectures. A quick run through the program. First, I will invite Ms. Cara Owen, British High Commissioner to Singapore, to introduce our speaker for the evening, Dr. Leonardo Aniello. Dr. Aniello will then deliver his lecture. If you have any questions that you would like to pose to Dr. Aniello, you could type these in the chat box. Dr. Aniello will try to address as many of these as he can after his lecture. If you see a question you like in the chat box that you would like to have answered, please click the like button. I'm a big fan of that. If you like a question, it makes it easier for me to choose that one to ask. Please click on the like button next to the question. This will help me choose the more popular ones and make sure that Dr. Aniello has a chance to go through the most urgent questions that hopefully will arise during today's discussion. We have asked for questions prior to today's session as well. So my colleagues will be putting that through the chat. So you may see some of your questions coming through from that as well. So please feel free to like those questions, pose your own questions. We like questions. We will aim to close the session right on time. Please take note that we are recording the session for the benefit of those who could not attend. Without further ado, let us begin. I'm very pleased to introduce you all to Her Excellency, Ms. Cara Owen. Ms. Owen has been the British High Commissioner to Singapore since June 2019. Prior to this, she was Director for the Americas at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and has served as Deputy Head of Mission at the British Embassies in Paris and Hanoi. Ms. Owen graduated from the University of Sheffield with a BA in History, holds an MSc from the London School of Economics in Diplomacy and International Strategy, and an MSc from Cranfield University in International Human Resource Management. Alongside her diplomatic work, she has focused on diversity and inclusion and organizational development. The High Commissioner will provide this evening's opening address and will then introduce our speaker. Over to you, High Commissioner.
Thank you so much, Leighton. So I'm really pleased to welcome all of you to the great lecture. Thank you to everybody who's joined us from the UK, from Singapore, from elsewhere for today's great lecture. As Leighton mentioned, it's a brilliant opportunity for us to connect academics, practitioners, students, and the general public to engage in topics that are really, really fundamental to our world today, topics such as art, science, the environment, and others. Typically, we try to explore topics that have significant interest both to the UK and to Singapore, so we find a bit of a match. But we know that in doing so, because the UK and Singapore are both very outwardly focused, internationally, hoping to be internationally relevant economies, we also alight on topics that are of much broader interest than just to our two countries. This year, we began the lecture series with a focus on the theme of climate change and environmental sustainability. It's a really hot topic in both of our countries and particularly relevant as we approach the United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties, or COP26, as we say for short, hosted by the UK in Glasgow in November this year. We then moved on to other really interesting topics, the online gig economy and energy mega projects. The next series of lectures then focused on the theme of technological advancement and innovation, from what the future of manufacturing would look like to autonomous vehicles and driverless futures. Today, I'm really pleased that we have Dr. Leonardo Aniello from the University of Southampton, a university that has a fantastic relationship with the universities here in Singapore. And he will be talking to us about an extremely relevant topic in today's increasingly digitalized world, cybersecurity. The image you'd have seen when you received the invitation to this lecture is that of the Government Communications Headquarters in Cheltenham. We call it GCHQ for short, and the building that you saw, because it's round with a hole in the middle, we affectionately call the Donut. This is the UK's Intelligence and Cyber Agency. If you visit their website, you can read about the fascinating history of the British signals intelligence right from World War I when it was established, through Bletchley Park, Enigma and World War II, to famous figures including Alan Turing, who many of us know the name of, who is considered the founding father of theoretical computer science and artificial intelligence. The UK's own cybersecurity mission is led by the National Cybersecurity Centre, which is part of GCHQ. And they have been created specifically to try and make sure that the UK remains the safest place to be operating online. And there's a real need for this safety mission. In today's digital world, with at least 3.5 billion people on their smartphones, cybersecurity is a global concern, not just for governments and corporates, but also for citizens like you and me. Cyber attacks undermine our confidence in doing really simple things that we've all become used to doing online from the palm of our hands, accessing government services, paying for online purchases, or booking our next vacations, whenever that is going to be. In May 27, Wannacry impacted the UK's National Health Service, with 48 NHS trusts held to a ransomware attack. This was sort of deeply shocking to many of us. Anybody who knows the UK knows how close to our hearts the NHS is and how fundamental it is to the health of our nation. In total, Wannacry affected at least 100,000 organisations across 150 countries, and Southeast Asia didn't escape. Closer to home, many of us will remember the Sing Health data breach in 2018 when hackers exfiltrated personal data and medical records of 1.5 million citizens, famously even including Singapore's PM. And in March this year, there was a cyber attack on Microsoft Exchange server, affecting a whole spectrum of businesses and individuals. At least 30,000 organisations were compromised in the US and around 3,000 in the UK. And this is just part of the ongoing trend of an increasing number of complexity of cyber attacks. In 2020 alone, the National Cybersecurity Centre dealt with more than 700 major cybersecurity incidents, and in total stopped 700,000 online scams targeting the UK. All of this just drives home the realisation that enhancing our collective capabilities in cybersecurity is an urgent global need and underlines the UK's goal of achieving a free, open, peaceful and secure cyberspace for all. In the UK, the government's already delivered a sustained programme of investment through GCHQ and the National Cybersecurity Centre to establish the UK as a global leader in cyberspace. The UK seeks to work with like-minded partners across the world and has further committed to investing £22 million in new funding to support cyber capacity building in vulnerable countries, particularly in Africa and the Indo-Pacific. On this side of the world, ASEAN is a leader in cyberspace with the ASEAN Singapore Cybersecurity Centre of Excellence set up in 2019, working to build capacity across the region. And the UK and Singapore work extremely closely in this space, building resilience against cyber attacks, cooperating on cyber capacity building between ourselves and more broadly in the region, developing standards on the security of internet-connected devices, and helping to shape the international discussions on responsible state behaviour in cyberspace. This can be evidenced in the MOUs that we have between us in cyber cooperation, signed in 2015 and 2018, and it's going to remain a really important part of our relationship as we continue our engagement and negotiations on a future UK-Singapore digital economy agreement. So what skills and capabilities should we develop so that we are better equipped to supporting global, regional and national level cybersecurity challenges? For this, I'm really delighted that we're going to hear from an expert rather than just me. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Aniello to you. Dr. Leonardo Aniello is an assistant professor in cybersecurity in the School of Electronics and Computer Science at the University of Southampton. Like I said, it's a very well-known institution, very well-known in Singapore for its strengths in this area. He's also a member of the GCHQ and EPSRC, that's the Engineering and Physical Science Research Council, Academic Centre of Excellence for Cybersecurity Research, which is based in Southampton. He obtained his PhD in engineering and computer science from La Sapienza University in Rome. And his current research is focused on distributed systems of cybersecurity, including machine learning for malware analysis, blockchain-based systems, and IoT security. Dr. Aniello, we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say to us, and I'm delighted to hand over to you now. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and thanks, Cara, for the introduction, and to all the team for inviting me and making this possible. Okay, so before diving into cybersecurity and how it can be improved using artificial intelligence and big data techniques, let me say something more about my institution. So the University of Southampton has been recently ranked among the top 100 universities in the world, precisely number 77. And as you can see here, there are several computer science courses available for both undergraduates and masters, including specializations in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. And if you want to know more about this, please scan the QR code you see here. And also, as Cara mentioned, Southampton has been recently awarded the Gold Award for Cybersecurity Education by the NCSC. And we also offer a certified master course in cybersecurity and also a provisionally certified undergraduate course in cybersecurity, which is a 4-year MEng in computer science with specialization in cybersecurity. And furthermore, in 2017, we were awarded by the NCSC the status of Academic Center of Excellence in Cybersecurity Research, right? So as a recognition of the research outputs of the academics working there. So let's now dive into the topics of this lecture. So I'll first give an overview about the situation regarding cyberspace and its security, describing 3 important cyber attacks as well as their impact. And I will also outline some of the main challenges to address in cybersecurity. I'll then introduce machine learning, which is a branch of artificial intelligence, and why and how it can help protect against cyber threats. After that, I'll also mention the need to integrate big data techniques to cope with the large amounts of data that need to be analyzed to enable machine learning to improve cybersecurity. Finally, I'll spend a few words on employability, outlining current trends regarding the job profiles most wanted in industry, what skills employers are looking for, and also what the University of Southampton offers in terms of, let's say, connecting students to industry. So we can't really talk about cybersecurity without first mentioning cyberspace, which encompasses any computer and device in the world, any network connecting them, as well as the data generated and processed. We can see that cyberspace is more and more intertwined with our everyday lives. Indeed, we are increasingly relying on the internet to support our daily activities. This lecture itself is a trivial yet powerful example of cyberspace. Other relevant examples include all the functionalities provided by our smartphones and, for example, video stream services. Another important and relatively recent piece of the cyberspace is the so-called Internet of Things, IoT, where we have millions to billions of intelligent devices that are being deployed in our smart homes and smart cities, and they interact with each other, with the environment, and with us in order to improve the efficiency in general and also quality of life. However, as you may be already aware of, the cyberspace is not always a nice and safe place to be because of the appalling number of cyber attacks against networks, computers, and data. Many cyber attacks aim to steal money from individuals or from enterprises or from banks. Others, and this is a really alarming and serious attack techniques. So other attacks are meant to steal money indirectly through ransomware, which encrypts all the documents stored in a computer and asks for a ransom to be paid to have these documents back. We also have data breaches as possible cyber attacks. And data breaches intend to steal data rather than money. And this data is then can be then sold on the black market or published online publicly, for example, to expose some misbehaviors or some inconvenient truth about some individual or organization or government. And sometimes, instead, attackers may want to disrupt the availability of some online service, such as a website or a portal, by launching the so-called distributed denial of service attacks, DDoS. And DDoS consists in flooding the target services with requests in such a way to make the service unresponsive. There are also more subtle attacks, such as the influence campaigns, where mostly state-sponsored attackers may launch a series of cyber attacks with the aim of affecting the public opinion, for example, towards one political party rather than another. And these campaigns can use a mixture of data breaches to damage the reputation of a party, and also they can use thousands of fake autonomous social media accounts to spread specific messages against or in favor of some individual or political party. And finally, another cyber attack I would like to mention is the web defacement, mostly used by hacktivists, that where they alter the content of some website, usually putting there some messages against the target itself, so that the public becomes aware of their intent and of the reason why the attack took place. So let me now describe you a bit more in detail three, let's say, noteworthy cyber attacks that took place quite recently. The first one is BlackEnergy. So we are in Ukraine just before Christmas 2015, and then a cyber attack successfully targeted and took down 3 energy distribution facilities. And this resulted in more than 200,000 people without electric power for several hours. So how did it work? So they first used spear phishing emails to gain access to the target infrastructures. Specifically, these emails were sent to employees of these infrastructures, and these emails had a malicious Word document attached. So these documents were malicious because they contained a malware. A malware is a malicious software that specifically designed to bring damage. In this case, the malware was a macro function in the Word document, and victims were explicitly asked to enable these macros, which they did in the end. And once the malware was activated, the victim's credentials were stolen and used to access and control the devices and machinery that operated the energy distribution facilities. So in this way, the attackers were able to disrupt the energy distribution service. And they also launched a denial of service attack against the call center of this company, so that all the thousands of affected people couldn't call the company to understand what was going on, which, as you can imagine, contributed to make the situation even worse. Another attack is Mirai, which was a botnet, so a network of devices, in this case IoT devices, controlled by an attacker. And this botnet was used in 2016 to launch many serious distributed denial of service attacks, so many DDoS attacks, as you can see in the timeline shown here. And one of the most significant attacks took place in October against a DNS provider. So a DNS provider provides a DNS service, where DNS stands for Domain Name System, and this service translates domain names such as www.southampton.ac.uk. So they translate domain names such that to IP addresses, and your browser needs to send requests over the internet to an IP address, not to a domain name. So this translation is fundamental to make the whole web work. Indeed, if the DNS goes down, then you can't usually access any website. And this is exactly what happened when Mirai targeted that DNS provider. And this in turn made important services like PayPal or Twitter unavailable for a few hours. And this is in the end the final goal of a DDoS attack. And the Mirai botnet was quite large, around 600,000 of IoT devices. So how could the attackers compromise so many IoT devices? Well, the way Mirai worked is pretty simple. But Mirai scans the internet looking for reachable devices and tries to log in into them using a number of credentials, so username and passwords, taken from a pre-configured list, which also includes the most common usernames and passwords used by default by major manufacturers. And if the login succeeds, then the malware is installed, and it becomes part of the botnet. So the passwords you see here on the bottom right are quite representative of the level of complexity of the passwords used nowadays in the real world for IoT devices. And this is actually the reason why Mirai botnet became so big and so powerful by really just using this trivial approach. And the last cyber attack I wanted to talk to you about is Wannacry, which was also mentioned by Kara. And this has been one of the most devastating malware ever. So Wannacry is a special ransomware that does not spread via email, as usually a ransomware does. Rather, it self-propagates via network. And Wannacry exploits a known vulnerability of Windows operating system, which allows to execute arbitrary code on compromised machines. And the attack started on the 12th of May 2017, and tens of thousands of computers were infected in every hour at that time. And after encrypting files, the malware demanded a payment around $300 in Bitcoin, and then later on the ransom increased to $600. And the impact of Wannacry was impressive. So we had more than 200,000 of computers infected across 150 countries. And some of these infected computers were used in important infrastructures, such as hospitals. So, for example, in the UK, many hospitals had say, important devices like MRI scanners and blood storage refrigerators no longer working, which you can imagine led to big problems that nurses and doctors had to deal with promptly. Some ambulances were diverted. Many daily operational procedures were twisted and delayed. Thousands of appointments were cancelled. Also, big car manufacturers like Nissan and Renault had to put their operations on hold because their machines were no longer working. So overall, the economic loss over the world was estimated in the order of billions. And so in this, let's say, worrisome and threatening scenario, where cyberspace is constantly under some form of attack, well, security practitioners from industry, governments, and university have to face some important challenges. So one of these challenges regards the human factor, because more and more cyber attacks are relying, at least partially, on the exploitation of users to succeed. For example, by sending spear phishing emails with malicious attachments, as we've seen in the BlackEnergy attack. So these social engineering attacks can be dealt with by training people to recognize possible threats in the cyberspace and behave accordingly. Another important challenge is mostly technical and consists in dealing with cyber attacks that keep growing both in number and sophistication. So this growth is due to several factors, including the fact that new devices such as smartphones and IoT gadgets are mostly designed and marketed, giving more importance to time to market and revenues rather than cybersecurity. So they are usually have some vulnerabilities or they are easy to exploit. Also, cyber attackers are nowadays becoming more skilled and organized and resourceful. Right? So how can we address this technical challenge? Well, so given the increasing complexity of today's cyber attacks, there is the need to draw from other powerful technologies to support the technical fight against threats in the cyberspace. Among those technologies, machine learning takes a special role. So machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence. Machine learning is about making a computer program learn, carry out some computational task without some programmer teaching the machine how to do it explicitly. Rather, a machine learning model is trained to perform the computational task. And the training consists in feeding the machine learning model with large amounts of data about the computational task, such as including a very large number of pairs where we have both the input of the task and the expected output of the task. And once the model has been trained, it can be used to carry out the computational task with high accuracy. And you may have already heard of machine learning with reference to other novel technologies such as facial recognition and self-driving vehicles. So machine learning is used in cybersecurity to extract intelligence and complex relationships from data collected through, for example, monitoring of a cyber infrastructure. So one of the main examples is where a machine learning model is trained to recognize malicious or suspicious network traffic. Or machine learning can be used to distinguish malware from legitimate software. And when a malware is detected or when some network activity, let's say some suspicious network activity is detected, then the machine learning can raise an alert that then is dealt with by some security practitioner, by some operator. And also machine learning may be used to, let's say, make hypotheses about the profile of the attacker that launched a given cyber attack. And here on the bottom, you can see the workflow of a machine learning based malware analysis workflow, where on the leftmost we have malware binaries that are executed in a controlled environment to extract data about their behaviors. And all this data is then pre-processed to extract relevant features and produce the input data for an already trained machine learning model. which in turn will generate some outputs, which in this specific case regarded how similar a malware is to other malware that were analyzed previously. One of the most important things machine learning requires in order to work well is data. So training an accurate machine learning model needs very large amounts of good quality data, which must be collected, stored, and processed. And obviously, the quality of the machine learning model, and for example, the detection accuracy of malware, strictly depends on the amount and quality of the data that was used to train the model. And this is where big data comes into play. So several definitions exist for big data, commonly expressed as a certain number of V's. Right? And here is one of the possible definitions that includes 4 V's. So the first V is about volume. And volume refers to the large amount of data. So the graph here on the right gives evidence of the exponential growth of the amount of data generated in the cyberspace over the last years. And instead, variety means that data is vastly heterogeneous. So storage and processing techniques must be designed to cope with different formats and structures of data, which also makes the interoperability more challenging. Velocity instead indicates the astonishing rate at which new data is generated, which is strictly linked to the volume aspect. Veracity finally denotes the need for data to be true and of high quality. And in the machine learning context, this is extremely important, as I said before, to ensure that the training is based on accurate and trustworthy data. Otherwise, the precision and the accuracy of trained models would degrade significantly. And dealing with big data usually requires let's say, large clusters of machines where data can be stored over more computers, possibly using so-called NoSQL databases. And if more data needs to be stored, then we can add further machines to the cluster. So these big data techniques rely on infrastructures that are scalable. And also, big data refers to processing tasks that can be ran on these large volumes of data. And also, these processing tasks can be distributed and parallelized over all the computers available in a cluster to make sure that all these computational tasks can be completed timely. And again, if we need to process more data, we can add further computational resources to the cluster to make sure that the overall computational time remains bounded. So to recap and to somehow connect the dots that we've seen so far, so we've seen that nowadays we are struggling to keep pace with the sophistication of cyber attacks, and that machine learning can offer a solution to automatically learn as much as possible from previous successful cyber attacks. And this helps reduce the technical gap between cyber attack strategies and cyber defense measures. Because otherwise, without machine learning, we should analyze all these past attacks, let's say, sort of manually. But instead, with machine learning, we can extract additional knowledge and additional, let's say, intelligence that we can then integrate with our existing cybersecurity solution in order to improve, for example, the detection accuracy, or to reduce the time it takes to understand what's going on in a system and take actions accordingly. However, the amounts of cyber attack data available to analyze and to, let's say, mine using machine learning techniques is extremely huge. So we need something else. So we need the big data techniques to be able to handle this data properly in terms of storage, trivial, and also querying this data and carry out all the required computational tasks to train machine learning models. So what does the University of Southampton do and offer regarding cybersecurity and machine learning? So as I mentioned before, we are one of the NCSC certified academic centers of excellence in cybersecurity research and education in the UK. We also have something called the Cybersecurity Academy, which somehow brings together university and industry to facilitate collaborations to tackle practical and relevant cybersecurity problems. We also have the Center for Machine Intelligence, set up to develop a sort of coherent and ethical approach to research and technology transfer in the areas of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and autonomous systems in general. And the center brings together researchers interested in both fundamental research as well as high impact applications. We also have MINDS, which is a center of doctoral training for PhD students, and it deals with research topics at the intersection between artificial intelligence, machine learning, and nanoelectronic devices. So let me finish with some brief mentions about employability. So what's happening right now in the UK computer science job market? So, well, we can identify three main trends. The first one concerns encouraging females to undertake computer science, educational, and industry careers. The second is that regards the international advantage. So the international advantage refers to the fact that despite the pandemic and despite Brexit, the industry is still looking for internationals because they are key to help penetrate global markets. So otherwise, these markets would be much more difficult to reach. And finally, likewise, the cyberspace itself, which keeps growing and developing relentlessly, technology jobs are increasing as well. So there is a very large demand for computer science in the UK. So, but what are let's say, what are these computer science jobs in practice? So here you can see a quite large number of sought after roles in the UK, and this includes both cybersecurity profiles like cybersecurity analyst, forensic computer analyst, and also penetration tester. With penetration tester is a security practitioner who tries to hack the IT infrastructure of a company with the consent of the company to identify possible vulnerabilities and address them in order to improve the cybersecurity of the IT infrastructure even more. We also have AI profiles such as machine learning engineer, and also jobs related to big data, such as data analyst and data scientist. And again, apart from purely technical skills, other wider employability skills are desired in the market, and these skills concern communication, collaboration, problem solving, independence, and also some kind of commercial mindset. And the University of Southampton provides resources and learning experiences to also develop these skills. For example, through group assignments for communication and collaboration, practical technical coursework to improve problem solving, and also workshops and other activities to nurture the entrepreneurial attitude. And I want to conclude with the careers and employability service offered at the University of Southampton, which fosters the connection between students and companies. So among the activities handled by this service, there is the Engineering and Technology Careers Fair, where we have tens of technology companies standing with their stand, and they are usually very keen to talk to students about their technologies and their business models, and also the job opportunities that are available. And that's all. So thanks for listening. And again, if you're looking for further information about the courses offered at the University of Southampton, please you can scan the QR code here and get further information.
Thank you, Dr. Aniello. That was really helpful. I think what strikes me is quite how vast the subject is that you addressed today. I know that in the back of my mind, I was probably thinking of cybersecurity in a sort of the new global conflicts that we tend to have between nations, but it really touches our everyday life and our phones all the way through to these big geopolitical issues. So I'm truly impressed by how much ground you managed to cover today, actually. So you saw some of the questions coming into to today's lecture, which I think you managed to address some of them, which has been really helpful. I might touch on a couple of points that have come in on the chat, but I would welcome others who are listening today. Feel free to type in your question if you want to, sort of like another one. That would be really helpful. We do have one from the floor that actually ties in with another question that we have as well, and it's a little bit to do with machine learning, AI. So I'll go to the concept first, because there's quite a lot of people wanting to work in the industry, which is a good sign for the industry, frankly, and also a good sign for the subject as well. But on the sort of subject matter itself, one of the earlier questions that we had was around whether quantum computing, and I don't think this is the right terminology to use, but I can understand where they're coming from, can beat AI and big data to protect against cyber threats. And I think another way of posing the same question is sort of with growing awareness around safeguarding, data privacy, with the accuracy and timeliness of accurate machine learning against cyber attacks, in turn be compromised. So, is quantum computing going to solve all of our problems, help us keep pace? Is it really just chasing the rabbit? What's your take on that?
So I say that quantum computing promises to provide solutions to solve problems that current computers are not able to solve in a feasible amount of time. So this means that quantum computing can significantly speed up some computational tasks, which otherwise would take too long to complete. And from this point of view, quantum computing may be integrated with AI and big data technologies to enhance cybersecurity even further. However, we should also consider the possibility that cyber attackers too may have access to quantum computing technology. So from this point of view, we can see quantum computing as another milestone in the, never-ending arms race between cyber attackers and security practitioners.
Yes, I was thinking that there's never going to be a silver bullet in situations like this, right? So it's part of the solution, and it also in turns become a new challenge rather than part of the problem, shall we say? But there you go. That's a complication. Another question that sort of came in before time, which I think is sort of interesting, if we think about, we obviously want to support a lot of SMEs, startups, new entrepreneurs going into business. So there's a big there's a significant interest, I would say, with people on the call who want to go into the industry. but there's also people who want to start their own businesses, and perhaps they have to start worrying about how to, manage these concerns. So I quite like the question that, somebody asked around how should a small organization of 60 users equip itself adequately to protect against cybersecurity threats? What does this mean to those of us who don't want to go into cybersecurity as a profession in and of itself, but totally are worried about it in terms of the businesses we ourselves might wish to set up?
Yeah, so in the end, it depends on the specific business processes of the company and let's say its level of reliance on the cyberspace, and also I would say how likely the company is to be targeted by cyber attack. In general, there are, let's say, some measures that any small medium enterprise can put in place to reduce the cyber risk, at least for what concerns the most common cyber attack vectors. And for example, in the UK, we have Cyber Essentials, which are sort of guidelines produced by the government that are simple enough to put in place and let's say powerful enough to protect companies from a large number of cyber threats. So this includes protecting the boundary of the cyber infrastructure of the company by deploying and configuring firewalls. It also includes, let's say, reducing the attack surface by making sure that all computers and devices and software are properly configured, for example, by changing the default credentials and removing unnecessary software. A third measure consists in configuring access control policies to ensure that each employee can only access the resources they really need to use to avoid misuse and also reduce the damage from compromised accounts. Also making sure that all computers have an updated anti-malware software installed, and also making sure that all software is up to date so that any known vulnerability is removed as soon as the corresponding patch is available. And last but not least, periodically training employees to recognize cyber threats and understand how to deal with them.
There's quite a lot of hygiene methods that I suppose we could take ourselves personally, I guess, apply at the organizational level as well. I like we've just had a question in that I think is a very positively worded question, so I hope the answer is equally positive. But what are the ways cybersecurity has improved over the course of the pandemic? We're all looking for a silver lining here. Is cybersecurity one of them?
Let's say that for sure cyber attacks have increased during the pandemic because everyone was working from home, and accordingly cybersecurity has improved as well because that there was large evidence of the need to somehow deal with these cyber attacks. And also I've seen that many companies, but also university, have increased let's say the amount of communications regarding cybersecurity. So many organizations provide employees with updated guidelines about how to protect themselves better.
So greater awareness and I suppose ownership of our cyberspace is something to protect, I guess, is just something that's come out of the pandemic. That's for sure. And obviously you saw that a lot of questions were on employability, and you kindly put in a list of the companies that you had in the fair, some of the skills. You might have mentioned it, but I wonder if I missed it, but in terms of sort of the types of courses one should take, is it extremely like, you should be doing IT and technology and engineering and so on, or, what sort of skills backgrounds should you have, or what sort of degrees, might you be able to get at degree level, or maybe for us to take us into it? Is it very specialized engineering from the beginning? Is it slightly wider? Because there was a lot of job roles that you showed us there, and I'm wondering if they're all, similar skill set.
Well, I believe that they all share some common skills. So I believe that a strong knowledge of the foundations of computer science, cybersecurity, machine learning, and distributed systems are required to then develop further skills that are, let's say, job and project specific. And this kind of foundational skills can be provided by a bachelor degree, by an undergraduate degree. And also, I would also add that another thing that is important is the ability to design, implement, and validate a solution. In this case, that combines, for example, machine learning techniques and big data technologies to address a cybersecurity problem, because this would help develop practical skills that this industry requires. And again, this kind of, let's say, experience is provided, for example, a bachelor degree with the final year individual project.
Amazing. So that's great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Aniello, for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone who was able to join us. That's all we have time for today. So on behalf of the British Council, let me thank Dr. Aniello for the stimulating and thought-provoking insights shared with us today. I'd also like to thank the Singapore Association for the Deaf and Shimei for supporting us with sign language interpretation during the session. Once again, thanks everyone for being part of the Great Lecture. Do remember that we'll continue running these lectures once a month for the rest of the year. Our next lecture is on the 30th of September with Professor Gideon Mass from Coventry University, who will talk to us about transformational entrepreneurship as a way of approaching sustainable socioeconomic development. We look forward to seeing you all next month, and have a good evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.